An internal document from the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, has just quietly revealed a truth that sends chills through the aviation industry. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a model praised as a top technological masterpiece, is facing a serious structural defect. What enrages the public even more? No official warning, no suspension directive whatsoever, absolutely no clear public statement. Everything seems to be hidden behind tightly closed doors. If this secret is exposed, could the Boeing empire collapse once more under the wave of crisis? Let us uncover this entire shocking truth in today's video. FAA discovers deadly flaw in Boeing Dreamliner. Insider's warning shocks the entire aviation industry. In January 2024, the name Sam Salapour sent shockwaves through the global aviation world. The veteran engineer, who had dedicated over a decade to Boeing, publicly raised the alarm about a serious manufacturing failure that could endanger the lives of thousands of passengers every day. In a complaint sent directly to the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and in an interview with the New York Times, he made a grave accusation. Boeing deliberately violated assembly procedures on the 787 Dreamliner model. The level of error, according to him, was so extreme that the aircraft could break apart mid-flight after a certain number of flight cycles. I saw with my own eyes workers stepping on airplane parts to align them. They stepped on and off repeatedly to force the temporary joints into place. That is not how airplanes are built. That is a factory of risk, Salapour said in an interview with CNN. What he revealed was not a case of isolated mistakes. According to Salapour, these defects directly affect more than 1,000 Dreamliners currently in operation worldwide, aircraft once hailed as Boeing's aviation dream. He specified that the fuselage sections were misaligned, the gaps between joints were excessively wide, and mechanical stress was uneven, and in many cases, workers had to use their own body weight to force the parts into temporary fit. Not stopping at the Dreamliner, Sam Salapour went on to expose similar violations in the Boeing 777 line. This indicates that the problem is no longer a technical error, but a deeply rooted culture of careless manufacturing. His warning outlined a chilling scenario. The aircraft's key structural components, made from ultra-light composite materials, may suffer from early fatigue and reduced pressure tolerance. More seriously, they could fracture if not detected in time. A ticking time bomb concealed beneath the white paint of countless commercial flights. Under the weight of these allegations, the FAA promptly launched a comprehensive investigation, although no grounding order has yet been issued. Meanwhile, Boeing strongly denied the accusations, stating that it had addressed the issues raised by Salapour and emphasized that extensive testing has shown no immediate safety risk. However, Salapour's lawyers stated that the FAA was shocked to learn that the structural gaps had not been fully resolved. They even accused Boeing of retaliating against Salapour by transferring him to another project, where he once again uncovered violations in the Boeing 777 assembly process. Boeing spokesperson Paul Lewis maintained the company's stance. "We have thoroughly reviewed it. This is not a matter that poses an immediate threat to flight safety." But for the public and aviation experts, such a statement does little to calm the anxiety sparked by the company's string of recent scandals. Facing this situation, Boeing has voluntarily halted the delivery of all 787 aircraft and is now working with the FAA to inspect, verify, and fix issues on the planes already delivered. Airlines operating this model have also been instructed to conduct thorough inspections, especially in the area where the wings connect to the fuselage. However, the issue at the joint between the wing and fuselage is only the tip of the iceberg surrounding the Dreamliner. A series of expanded investigations are continuously uncovering severe violations in both technical and internal procedural aspects, leading many experts to question whether Boeing is facing a full-scale quality crisis. One of the most serious findings from the FAA is the falsification of the inspection process. According to investigation records, several employees reported that they had completed checks on critical components of the aircraft's frame, but in reality, those inspections were never carried out. This means that some Dreamliners may have entered service without undergoing even the most basic technical verification, putting flight safety at an unacceptable level. In reality, safety only existed on paper. Even worse, some structural parts of the Dreamliner were found to be made from substandard titanium material. Hundreds of components were manufactured using titanium alloys that failed to meet industry standards, with lower durability and insufficient corrosion resistance. These parts were quietly integrated into the aircraft and were only discovered after independent audits of suppliers and internal inspection systems. Finally, another extremely dangerous flaw that has received little attention is the risk of pilot seat slippage during landing, a scenario that could lead to catastrophic consequences if it occurs at a critical moment. Some seat models installed on the 787 were found to be incapable of remaining secure under intense vibration conditions, especially when the aircraft lands at high speed. Unintended movement or shifting of the pilot's seat could directly impact control actions and lead to a loss of aircraft control at the most sensitive moments of the flight. These are serious warnings about the structural safety of this flagship aircraft line, at a time when Boeing is still under significant pressure from a series of ongoing quality issues in recent years. Once again, the question arises: are such systemic technical errors being uncovered too late? And has Boeing truly learned any lessons from the 737 MAX disaster? After a chain of recurring failures, the response from authorities remains silence. A serious technical flaw, yet the FAA remains silent. Who is protecting Boeing? Amid growing public anxiety and a barrage of expert questions, the Federal Aviation Administration has finally made an official statement. There are currently no plans to ground the Boeing 787 aircraft operating in the United States. The justification provided is that there is not yet sufficient technical evidence to justify such an extreme measure. It sounds reasonable, but behind that answer lie major concerns about transparency, oversight responsibility, and the blurred lines between engineering standards and commercial interests. Because what we are facing is not a minor glitch, but a systemic flaw silently embedded in hundreds of aircraft flying every day. Although it has not yet led to a fatal accident, its hidden nature and difficulty to detect are precisely what raise the greatest concerns among safety experts. Yet, the FAA maintains its stance. Every action must be based on verifiable data, not on public emotion, media pressure, or viral videos circulating online. U.S. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy even issued a clear warning. We do not make decisions based on what is trending online. Commercial aviation does not operate on panic. He emphasized that every action must be based on thorough analysis, from black box data and technical logs to maintenance history, and not just what people see through a phone screen. This may sound reasonable until you look at the broader context. Boeing is currently the largest wide-body aircraft supplier in the world, and the 787 is the backbone for numerous international airlines. Suspending this aircraft model would trigger a domino effect. Global flight schedules disrupted, supply chains fractured, and billions of dollars in contracts frozen instantly. In that light, the choice to wait for more evidence is not merely technical, but a dangerous balancing act between safety and financial stability. The recently crashed 787 had a flawless service record, over 11 years in operation, nearly 700 flights just this year, and more than 41,000 accumulated flight hours. No technical warning was recorded prior to the incident, but that is exactly what has shaken public confidence. If a plane deemed fully functional can still fall from the sky, how many others are silently carrying the same hidden risk? At present, the FAA is working in coordination with Boeing, General Electric, and Indian aviation authorities to investigate the root cause of the incident. They insist that any grounding decision in the future will only be made if technical analyses produce clear evidence. That may sound rigorous, but given its past criticism for a delayed response in the 737 MAX disaster, the public has reason to worry. Will they have to endure yet another long wait for answers? Because in aviation, delays in action are sometimes paid for with the lives of hundreds. And if, in the near future, the FAA is forced to ground the entire Dreamliner fleet, the consequences will extend far beyond a crisis within Boeing. It will send shockwaves through the entire global aviation system. If the Boeing 787 were to be grounded, could the global aviation ecosystem remain intact? The Dreamliner is not merely an aircraft model, it is the essential strategic backbone for long-haul routes operated by dozens of major airlines around the world. Any suspension order, even for just a few days, could trigger a devastating domino effect: mass flight cancellations, global schedule disruptions, and financial losses totaling billions of dollars. And undoubtedly, an unprecedented crisis of trust surrounding the Boeing name would erupt. Take Japan, for example. All Nippon Airways, ANA, the national airline and the very first customer of the Dreamliner since 2011, is currently operating 84 787s, the highest number in the world. More than half of ANA's international network relies entirely on this fleet, from Tokyo to Los Angeles, from San Francisco to London. If the 787s are grounded, ANA's global strategy, built over more than a decade, could collapse overnight. Recognizing the severity of the risk, the Japanese government has ordered a full inspection of all 142 Boeing 787 aircraft currently operating in the country, spread across 4 major airlines: ANA, Japan Airlines, Air Japan, and Zip Air. The inspection covers not only the aircraft frames but also the entire engine systems. This reflects an extremely high level of caution from a country known for having some of the most rigorous aviation safety standards in the world. In the United States, United Airlines is also facing a similar threat, with 78 Boeing 787 aircraft in service and an additional 150 on order. The Dreamliner is a vital foundation for United's global expansion strategy. If this aircraft model is forced out of operation, it would not merely be a disruption, but a direct blow to one of the largest growth ambitions in U.S. aviation history. American Airlines is not in a better position. The airline currently operates 63 Dreamliners, covering the majority of its intercontinental and transoceanic flights. Should a grounding order be issued, its long-haul network would be severely impacted, especially during the peak season of international travel and commerce. Even smaller carriers like Hawaiian Airlines, now part of Alaska Air Group, would feel the cascading effect. As the company pushes to expand into premium and global markets, the loss of the Dreamliner fleet would mean losing its only competitive edge on long-distance routes. In other words, if the Dreamliner is grounded, the entire map of global aviation will need to be redrawn. And by that point, the question will no longer be whether to ground it, but how long can the industry withstand the impact before everything begins to collapse? The safety history of the Boeing 787, a clean legacy or a technical illusion? From its debut, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was introduced as a revolutionary figure in long-haul aviation, with over 50% ultra-light composite materials, lower fuel consumption, and superior performance. The Dreamliner was seen as the pinnacle of modern technology embodied in a next-generation wide-body aircraft. Yet, just 2 years after its first flight, the Dreamliner was grounded worldwide. In 2013, lithium-ion battery explosions on several 787s prompted the FAA and multiple countries to suspend the entire fleet, an exceptionally rare precedent in the history of commercial aviation. Although the battery crisis was resolved, the Dreamliner continued to face a string of technical problems: misaligned fuselage joints, anomalies in electrical systems, fuel system malfunctions, and cracks in its carbon composite skin. Production was repeatedly interrupted, deliveries delayed, and a series of inspections expanded. The FAA had to step in multiple times to reinforce oversight. Nevertheless, despite the technical setbacks, the Boeing 787 maintained a flawless safety record. No fatal accident has ever occurred. This zero-death statistic became the strongest shield for confidence, and the reason why airlines have continued to tie their long-haul future to the Dreamliner. But what happens when that zero fatality number is no longer true? The catastrophic crash of Air India Flight 171 has shattered the long-standing silence. Although no direct evidence currently implicates the Dreamliner, unsettling questions have begun to surface. How could an aircraft once hailed as the pinnacle of safety encounter such a severe failure? Was something overlooked from the beginning? The story turns darker with the sudden death of a former Boeing engineer, a man who had publicly warned about serious errors in the Dreamliner assembly process under circumstances described as suicide. He once stated, "Someone will die because of these mistakes." And now, perhaps, he was right. There is no official conclusion, no specific accusation, but the timing, the signs, and the historical patterns are beginning to form a picture that cannot be dismissed until the investigation reveals the full truth. One fact remains: the Boeing 787, while still considered a technical marvel of modern aviation, now faces a sobering question. Is this latest crash an early warning of another systemic failure, like the one that brought down the Boeing 737 MAX? Silence can sometimes come at the cost of hundreds of lives. If the allegations made by engineer Salehpour are true, then the hundreds of Boeing 787 Dreamliners flying every day are nothing less than ticking time bombs suspended in the stratosphere. The danger does not lie in an immediate explosion, but in the gradual, silent fractures accumulating with each passing flight hour. Misaligned joints, fuselage sections forcibly jammed together by stomping, composite materials bearing pressure in off-axis conditions. All of it is slowly eroding the aircraft's structural integrity, millimeter by millimeter. Each climb and descent stretches the shell, and that weakening happens quietly. Salehpour warns, once a certain threshold is crossed, perhaps after several thousand takeoffs, the aircraft could break apart mid-air with no advance warning, no sirens, no flashing lights, no window to correct the failure. A single crack at 10,000 meters could turn into a full-blown aviation catastrophe in seconds, taking not only hundreds of lives, but delivering a blow to public trust that the industry may spend decades trying to repair. Worse still, the Dreamliner was originally designed for a service life of 20 to 30 years. This means that if the current potential issues are not clarified and fully addressed, defective aircraft could continue operating for another 10 to 20 years, carrying hundreds of millions of passengers across oceans without anyone knowing what might be waiting ahead. Silence, delay, and lack of transparency at this moment are no longer matters of ethics. They are a direct threat to human safety. The FAA's decision not to ground the aircraft, the media's limited coverage of the whistleblowers' warnings, all of it is contributing to the formation of a dangerous gray zone, where death does not come from a loud explosion, but from a deliberate refusal to speak up. If the crash of Air India Flight 1D71 is a wake-up call, then the truth must be brought to light now. Not after a Boeing 787 vanishes over the Atlantic. Not after a black box records a small crack that had been there for years. And certainly not after the world is left asking, why did no one say anything while there was still time to act? Will the veil surrounding this haunting silence ever be lifted? In the shadows of repeated denials and unsettling silence from major corporations, one question grows sharper by the day. Who will be held accountable if the next catastrophe occurs? Will it be Boeing, with its production line accused of fundamental violations? The FAA, for hesitating so long it borders on apathy? Or is it us, the passengers, who continue to place faith in the phrase completely safe? Pieces of the puzzle are slowly emerging, yet the full picture remains hidden. Something is being concealed. Someone is being protected. And when the one person who dared to speak out ends up dead under suspicious circumstances, is that truly just a personal tragedy, or a sign of a system decaying from within? The investigation is ongoing, but time does not pause. Each day that passes, each Boeing 787 flight that takes off, is another day the fracture continues to grow, not just on the aircraft's body, but within the public's trust. The truth must come out, not after disaster strikes, but before we run out of time to stop it. If you believe this information matters, don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the latest updates on this unfolding global aviation crisis.